Hi there, in this video we're going to go over how to do percents, discounts, and markups using the percent equation. So let's get started. For number one says Brian bought a new jacket at a discount of 20%. The original price was $65. How much did he pay for the jacket? So first thing that you need to do, or you need to know, is part is equal to percent as a decimal times your whole. So you have to know that you have to know this equation. You need to memorize it. Everybody that does percents knows how to do this equation. All right, we need to understand that if the jacket is discounted 20% off, then Brian is only paying for 80% of it, because 100% minus 20% gets you 80%. Okay, so if it's discounted 20%, that means that he's only paying 80%. He's not paying the full 100% of the cost. He is not paying the original cost. He's only paying for 80% of it. So your job is to find 80% of 65. So once you know this part, plugging it in to the equation up here should be easy. So so let's start. Part equals percent as a decimal times your whole. The percent as a decimal, we know that to go from percent to a decimal, you have to move the decimal point over 2 places to the left. So let's start with that. If you move it 2 places to the left, you have 0.8, or you can think of it as 0.80, whichever one you want. And then times your whole, or times the original cost, which is $65. So the whole amount, the original cost, is $65. You're figuring out what 80% of that is, which will get you $52. Okay, 0.8 times 65 gets you $52. All right, let's look at number 2. Stephen bought a new computer at the end of a sale. The price of the computer was $50 on the day he bought it. The next day, it had been marked up 30%. How much was a new price after the sale? All right, so again, start with your equation. Part equals percent as a decimal times your whole. And let's understand the question. If the computer is marked up 30%, okay, he's actually paying for 130% of the cost, because 100% plus 30% gets you 130%. All right, so he's not just paying 100%. He's not just paying $50. He's paying for 130%. So your job is to find 130% of 50. So this is what we're finding right here. 130% of 50. So we're going to plug in our pieces that we know. So part, or x, equals our percent as a decimal. So 130% as a decimal is 1.30 times your whole, which you originally started with $50. Once you do that, you can solve. 1.30 times 50 is 65. So after a markup of 30%, the computer costs $65 instead of $50. All right, number 3. Wilson bought a painting for X dollars. After 1 year, the value of the painting increased by 6%. Which expression best represents the new value of the painting? All right, let's understand the question. So if the value of the painting increased by 6%, then the new value that you're finding is 106%. Okay, so your job is find 106% of X. So 106% is 1.06 as a decimal times X, which leaves you with 1.06x, which is B. This represents 100% of the original value plus 6% of the additional value. All right, number 4. Margaret grew apples on a portion of her garden last year. She intends to reduce the length of each side of the portion of her garden she uses this year by 20%. If the length of each side of the portion she used last year was 15 feet, what is the new length of each side of the garden she wants to use to grow the apples? All right, so let's think about this for a second. Let's understand the question. If one side is 15 feet, then 15 feet represents 100%. Okay, so if one whole side length is to 15%, or sorry, one whole side length is 15 feet, this represents 100% before the reduction. Okay, afterwards, it gets reduced. It gets reduced by 20%. So here, right, it gets reduced by 20%. So 80% of the portion is being left over. 100 minus 20 gets you 80. Once you know that you're finding now 80% of 15, we can go ahead and solve. We can input our pieces into the equation and solve. So 0.80 times 15, that gets you with 12. So after reducing each length by 20%, each length is now 12 feet instead of the original 15. All right, so just again, so we understand, if the portion is being reduced by 20%, then you're left with 80% left over. So your job is to find 80% of 15 feet. Okay, moving on to the next question. Number 5, last year Sarah's piano teacher charged $30 per hour for private lessons. This year the teacher increased her rates by 15%. How much is the teacher charging per hour for lessons this year? So let's understand the question first. $30 represents the original value. All right, this is how much she started with, this $30. Or 100%. She's choosing to increase her value by an extra 15%. Okay, so if $30 represents 100%, and she increases her value by 15%, you have to add 100%, which is her original value, plus that 15%, which is the additional value, to get 115%. So your job is to figure out what is 115% of 30. Okay, so once you know that that's your job, let's input the numbers that we know. 115% as a decimal is 1.15. Remember, to go from a percent to a decimal, you have to move the decimal 2 places over to the left. All right, and then you're multiplying it by 30 because that's what you start with 30. That's your original cost, or that's the original amount. So 1.15 times 30 gets you $34.50. So just so we understand, she is now charging $34.50 after her 15% increase. So originally she was charging $30 and now she is charging $34.50. Originally 100% represented $30. Now 115% represents $34.50. All right, let's look at the next question. A backpack that costs Q dollars is on sale. Choose 2 expressions from the box below to show the correct price of the backpack in the spaces provided. All right, so for part A, if the backpack was 30% off, okay, it's discounted 30%, you're only paying for 70% of the cost because 100%, which is the original, minus 70% gets you 30%. So the equation you would need to use is 0.7Q. Okay, don't get confused with Q. Every other problem we actually had a number for Q. Okay, for this problem we don't have a number for Q. Q represents the amount of dollars. If it makes it easier for you, change Q to like $10 or $20 or whatever, if you want. All right, so part B, the price of the backpack after a 60% discount. So it's discounted 60%. What are you actually paying for? You're not paying 60%. You're not paying 100%. You are paying 40%. Because 100% minus 60% gets you 40%. All right. Let's move on to the next question. Use a circle graph to answer the question. Suppose 700 students were surveyed. How many more students prefer math over English? All right, so there are 29% of the students like math. 22% of the students like English. So let's see the difference between the two. 29% minus 22% gets you 7%. All right, so 7% difference. So our job now, if we know that there are 700 students, you need to figure out what is 7% of the 700 students. Now, please pay attention to how you move the decimal. Okay, 7%. If you move the decimal 2 places to the left, you get 0.07, not 0.7, 0.07. And then you multiply that by 700, and you end up getting 49. So 49 represents a 7% difference, or the difference in the students who prefer math over English. All right, so it looks like I will have to actually do a part 2 of this video. So I hope you learned how to do questions 1 to 7 by watching this. I will be doing a part 2 right now. All right, so thank you for watching. Stick around for part 2.